So this is Audra Lambert. She was originally from New Orleans. She's an independent curator and art critic based in New York City. Audra's been very busy. She's a founder, curator of Antecedent Projects. In 2014, she founded that. It's a New York City-based curatorial consultancy focused on site-specific projects. She's also editor-in-chief of Anti-Mag, which if any of you are on Instagram, you might have seen that, or you should definitely follow that. She was a curatorial manager of Art in Odd Places 2018 body. Lambert has curated exhibits with the Last Queen of New York City in 2019, Center for Jewish History 2018, New York City Arts Department at the Arsenal Gallery, that was 2017, Flux Art Fair 2016, and more. Lambert is a co-founder of social justice initiative that's called Alt Break and has worked with New York-based artist nonprofits, More Art, and also with Material for the Arts. The New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, she's worked with them, Art in General. She is a contributor for HuffPost Arts, Art Fuse, Americans for the Arts, Quiet Lunch, and others. And if she had not enough to do, she is also the director of the Amos Enos Gallery in Brooklyn. Very busy. Nice to see you, Audra.
Thank you, Carolyn. What a lovely introduction. And I am here at Amos Eno Gallery right now. So it's lovely to see everyone there. Hi, and so happy to be invited today to present. I actually sent my PDF over, Fran, because it's not letting me share here. So if someone's
Eileen,
sure, on Instagram, if you want to follow the projects that I'm working on, just as a curator, I would follow me at Ante, it's ANTE with 2 underscores and the word curatorial, CURATORIAL. So
fantastic.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just that we've enabled screen sharing, so you can go ahead and screen share.
Fantastic. Okay, so you've already heard my introduction from Carolyn. Thank you so much for that. It was lovely. And for today, I just wanted to speak a little bit on the exhibition life cycle from the perspective of a curator. I know that many of you have had shows that either you were helping to organize or you actually already curated. So this is kind of even a baseline for you to measure against and see like what looks kind of the same, what maybe looks slightly different. And I'm happy to answer any questions after. I also put my website on here for antecedent projects for the exhibitions. It primarily focuses on the shows I have at the Yard in Williamsburg, but I do have older shows here as well. So with that, we can move on to the presentation itself. Next page here.
Okay.
There we go. All right, so then we can just skip through that because I'm going to give a brief introduction to today's presentation. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for an exhibition as a curator. And this is, once again, kind of a baseline of how to make sure you have everything fully covered and that you are ready to go in as you approach the exhibition opening date and then also through the show. So I will talk a little bit about how I find artists, specifically more on the group show side of things, and then also meeting with artists and preparations and organization throughout the show. So, and again, every show has a different kind of lead time, right? So the shows that I have at the Yard are roughly 12 weeks. So some shows maybe 4 to 6 weeks, you know, some are a few months. So I just wanted to add that in for clarity. Then we can head on over to the next here. And okay, so we're going to move through kind of a checklist or like a play-by-play through the weeks. Okay, so then about 3 to 6 months out, here's where the planning really begins for the show. And again, it really hedges on where you're showing, right? So somewhere like a major museum, more than likely the preparation will start at least maybe 2-3 years out, right? So this is a space that I manage. I know it very well. I'm here all the time. So 3 to 6 months out, we're going to start with moving right along. The things we'll do in this frame of time are we're going to look into the theme of the exhibit and kind of plan out the use of space, right? So when thinking of a group show, especially if the space is already known to the curator, generally you have a sense of the layout in advance. You kind of have an intuitive feel for the dimensions overall and what's going to work and what kind of won't, right? So if it's a new space, the curator would start with a site visit or two, have a few conversations with the staff there, really get to know what works, kind of like how they use the space, right? That's all very important to know that you are using it correctly. Specifically, when I was at the Center for Jewish History, you know, a lot of these spaces have to be ADA accessible. So the width in between, say, maybe sculptures has to be a certain amount of feet. These are the kind of things you want to know when you're planning a show, right? That's super important for them as well. So then after site visits, it would really, primarily the focus is on the theme or the concept of a show, right? So for example, for another presentation I did earlier this week for Ninth Street Collective, of which I'm a founding member, which I should have mentioned as well before I started, but we had a workshop that I was the leader of, I think Tuesday night, and we were talking about having an abstract, say maybe photography show, right? So then obviously the artists I would be looking at are artists who are photographers who work in abstract. So having a theme, having a core concept in mind. If it's more research focused, obviously starting that process as well, going into libraries, going into archives, making sure the themes are fully fleshed out here. And then just also thinking about, you know, like what artists, but also like how they would read through the space. So when searching for artists, a few months out is when the exhibition research actually starts. So if a show is at a smaller known venue, like, so if I say a known venue, again, the curator is very familiar with the space. It may start here again, 3 to 6 months. And as I mentioned, if it's a larger space or it's kind of a more institutionalized, you know, space, it'll be a year plus. So for the yard, I wanted to outline this because I felt like for New York Artist Circle, this would be probably the most asked question, and I already saw it in the chat. So there are 3 primary ways that I source artists. So one is through conversations with artists I've already met, either through exhibition openings I've had, or meetings I've had, or workshops, or conversations, or anything of that nature. And I've had a card, I've seen the work for a second, I'm familiar with what the artist is doing, and I know that it aligns with the theme, right? Because if it's a group show, it has to be on theme. The second way is if, for example, say I primarily know, like say artists who work in sculpture, maybe soft sculpture, and I have a show that I'm working on with someone else, and it's primarily, say like a print show. So maybe I need to source some artists who work primarily, say, in printmaking, and perhaps I don't have those contacts. I will reach out to someone else who's a peer. So either a curator, an artist, perhaps another gallerist, and I'll say, you know, I have a printmaking show coming up. It's me and this other person we're curating, and I want to make sure that I have an eye to like what's new in the field, like emerging or mid-career artists in the field. So those recommendations are super helpful. And then finally, the third way is through social media. So once again, through Ninth Street, when we do have these kind of, I mean, specifically me personally, I lead a workshop on how to approach a curator. So one thing I say is having very clean imagery, especially if you get some detailed shots of your work in the Instagram images. Perhaps you have a gallery that starts with the main image and then it has some detailed shots. That's super important because you do have a lot of either art dealers or maybe gallerists or even just independent curators that are on Instagram and searching for artists, hashtagging too, but we won't get into that too much here. But it's important to have an overall presence that will attract a curator. So then assembling relevant information, as I already mentioned, if it is a show around a theme, like maybe it's like women in abstraction from the 1970s until the present, right? So I'll have a folder where I'll start to kind of amass a lot of that research, right? Like maybe I have like some Linda Beglis, some Harmony Hammond, and I'm also seeking out some artists that are from like, you know, maybe the past like 3, 5, 8 years. So all of that will be in a folder, right? So then I tend to use maybe Google Drive more than other platforms, but maybe it's a Dropbox folder if I'm sharing it with someone else, and all the relevant materials will be assembled here. So I'll have a folder, maybe a subfolder for each artist who I have in mind for the show. And this is also going to be where I place all my loan documents, right? That artists need to sign and send back. Floor plan for the show. Any other documents that I plan to either share with the artists or, as I already mentioned, research materials, right? So that's all going to live here in a single folder, and I will be updating it throughout. So then 1 to 2 months out, right, we're starting to get a little closer. Thank you for moving along. And we're going to keep on moving through to this period of time. Studio visits will start around now. Once again, this is a space that I know intimately. So it's easy for me to kind of have a sense through an artist website of what I want to see. And then I'll head into the studio either virtually still or now a little bit more in person, and see what is available, right? Because even if I like a work, that doesn't mean it's going to be available for loan for the show. So through the studio visit, I will have a sense of the interest the artist has in the show, kind of like what their relevancy is through conversation. Maybe if it's research heavy and they're not super aligned with the theme, then that might impact me. On the flip side, if they're super into the theme, that will impact me, right? So again, this is for smaller shows. It would be 1 to 2 months out. There is a secondary thing that I do keep in mind, and that's around price point. In general, the works I have for view, or I should say for sale on view at the yard, are between like 3,000 to maybe up to 10,000, but it tends to center around 4,500 to 8,000 if I'm really being honest. So that'll also be in the back of my mind. I mean, if I love an artist's work and it's only $1,500, that's fine. But if an artist's work is okay for the show and it's like 30,000, then that might impact me, right? So again, like when you're talking to the gallerist, a big part of what they're thinking about is how you're going to fit into the sales, I guess, prospectus for the show, like how you align with other artists that they're showing. Because also in addition, I do sell through ArtSpace online. So it's helpful to have similar price points. This will also be when we talk about the logistics, right? It's the delivery of works. If a work's on loan in another show and I want it for this show, how will that be coordinated, right? Things like that, the layout of the work through the space, all of the sales information, the payment expectations, the consignment agreements, et cetera. So all of that will happen at the very latest, roughly a month out from the show. And again, all that paperwork would be saved, right, in that same folder. And then also assembling press materials, right? So having some images of artwork that I know will feature in the show, and then having that ready to add into a press release, have on the website, having CVs and statements and bios from the artist to print along with the price list for the opening date, right? So all this is important, and then starting to promote on social media, through emails, etc. And then we're going to get right up to the wire here. So less than a month before the show, we're going to, I mean, once again, it's super key to look at marketing, right? So we're going to talk about having the information right for the e-blast. All of the information there has already been run by the artist and any corrections have been made. I will send about 3 to 4 emails throughout the course of the show. Since my shows at the yard are slightly longer, I might do 5 or 6. And again, I'll also reconfirm with artists any of the dates for the programming. So for example, the opening, if we're doing a tour, et cetera. So this is also when I will fully finalize the price list, have it ready as a PDF and actually start to print it. I'll also have the press release around this time. The website will be updated as well as all my email signatures. That this year I have been a little slower on than usual. I think I updated my email signatures like the week that the show was installed, but generally I'll try to have it within 2 weeks prior to the show, and then the opening event as well, right? So all of that will be handled and managed through the space. I've started to have an Eventbrite so that I can check RSVPs and make sure everyone has their vaccine cards. So that's all around this window of time. And then so then also around this time is when you start outreach to collectors and press. For me, because I do have a smaller circle, it's pretty informal. I'll just like start to send out just like regular text messages to people, some emails privately. If I know someone's interested in an artist or a specific style of work, I'll sort of like have specific images of the work I know that they'll like kind of ready to send over to push. And then sometimes after an opening event, I'll also have a dinner that's kind of private for people that I think will have an interest in the show. And then also around this time is when all of the images, the information for sales of artwork will be sent to ArtSpace, which is our sale platform online for ENT. And then I was thinking about stopping it right before the exhibit, but there's still things you have to do throughout the show, right? So I wanted to kind of go through and then through the end as well. So once again, if there's any events happening throughout the course of the show, obviously pre-COVID, we had more, but now it's more like a virtual sort of tour. Obviously the opening, sometimes you have a closing event. So all that has to be managed and marketed and sent out following up with sales inquiries. That's pretty simple and straightforward, but that has to happen as well, right? And then I do have specific ways that I accept my payments. And then just also through social media, you have to, I mean, we all do this, right? It's like it's almost a constant companion, social media. You have to be there all the time reminding people because everyone else is here doing the same thing. So that's very important throughout the course of the exhibit. And then I just once again wanted to drive the point home that the opening of the show is not the end of the work involved for the show. So moving on to after the exhibit, this is the part where I have to figure out anything that has sold, shipping timelines, the expectations for that. If someone lives a certain place, figuring out how they want it shipped to them, having them kind of work around any deadlines they have in mind. In general, I think this is known, but I want to reiterate it. It should be the collector handling shipping unless the artist happens to know them and it's a local delivery and they want to show up and kind of handle that themselves, that's fine. But in general, if it's not like a friend or you don't feel as though it would help you to make a local delivery, then it's absolutely fine to expect the collector to handle that. So for the sales split and for the consignment, after the artwork is paid, obviously that split will go to the artist, figuring out if they want it through Zelle or through Venmo or what have you. And then also obviously as works are sold, having the online work also marked as sold so it doesn't accidentally sell twice. Hanging on to work. So my consignment is for 1 month out from a show. So I would have the work on ArtSpace through a 30-day period following the show. And then finally, any sort of relevant materials after the show, we have been doing virtual tours. So having a video recording of that tour and sending that around to artists. I also hire a professional photographer for each of my shows to come and to take install shots. So all of that would be sent to the artist along with a thank you note for working together with me, because it's always a pleasure to find new artists and to work on exhibits with them. And I believe that's the start of the question round. So yeah, thanks guys.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you so much. First of all, a round of applause for our speaker and for Audra. Thank you so much. You've given us a really comprehensive look at the logistics of putting together a show. And I think we have some questions already coming up. So what was the first question I saw was about, well, I wrote it down. Someone asked if you use press lists or if you use a service for sending out the press release or.
I use yeah, but I know, I mean, I've used like 3 different services at this point. For another space, it was Constant Contact. For Amosino, we use Robly, which I hadn't heard of before being here. But yeah, I do generally, but it is important to note that sometimes it will go to spam folders. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're trying to weigh using that kind of service against just like having an email list and sending it obviously up to everyone in like a BCC, right? But if that's the way you've been doing it and people are coming, then I'm not here to weigh one against the other, but I do personally use MailChimp.
Oh, MailChimp. Okay, good to know. And okay, someone asks, when looking for artists, what makes an artist's work stand out for you?
It's really the theme of the show, right? So that shows that primarily focused on using like, say, more of an unconventional material in the studio. So that was mainly sculpture, but kind of again, like using maybe familiar things, but in unfamiliar ways. So I've also had shows that were specific to soft sculpture and to fiber arts. For some reason, the past like 2 years, I've just been really into that, probably because of my thesis that I finished last year for my MA program. But I will say having a recommendation from another artist really goes a long way, especially if it's someone who I've already worked with and if they have worked with you and they recommend you, because that to me is kind of a soft, like almost a guarantee in a way that like, I know that you're actually going to show up and like really be there and show up for the opening. And sometimes those things matter a lot too. So I would say in addition to being on theme and obviously making strong work. I mean, I think that goes without saying. Like I feel like if you're here, you're already probably making strong work. So I don't need to say that. But again, having strong work and being on theme. And then I would say like a secondary kind of a soft like shoe in is having someone in common that we know that can vouch for you and just kind of like reconfirm that.
So connections.
Like, I think making a good impression. It's like, even if you met someone in 10 minutes, but they know that you were in a show with a friend of theirs, like if I ask them, hey, I need someone who works in like, I don't know, like who makes the cyanotype, like I'm just throwing something out there. Then even if they don't even know you that well, they could say, well, you know, I have a friend, Mary Beth, who was in the show with a cyanotype artist, like, let me check in with her. So it's not like this idea that like you have to be out all the time, just like making new connections, especially it's still kind of COVID hard, but just like actually like having people in your network who know of you. And again, just having work that is relevant to the theme. I can't.
So I just wonder, you talk about, you know, work that's relevant to the theme. Do you ever see work that you love and build your theme around the artist's work, or do you usually have the theme first?
I usually have the theme first, but I will say if I love an artist and they're not on theme, I will absolutely bookmark them for future shows. And I have actually done that in the past, and I have worked with those artists. So it's not just like, oh, if I don't work with you right now, it'll never happen. It's more of like, I have you in mind for something else and you're at the top of the list.
Many people are thanking you for your excellent presentation. I just want to say that.
And I circulate it. Fran has it. So I saw somebody ask, and you can feel free to share it. I'm happy to share.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, great. We'll send out the PDF. Someone asks where exactly you get your updated press lists.
Oh, that's interesting. I do get a pretty fair amount of signups either through social media. I also do open calls as well. So anyone who's entered either through my website, they've added their email, or they've entered for something, or they were in an article. I think I'm a little different because I run a mag as well, and I also run a space. So I tend to have a lot of soft leads. I think the difference between me and an artist is that I think if you're an artist who's organizing a show, like you do need to be out there researching and finding email leads. And I feel pretty lucky that I have a pretty solid set of soft leads already coming in through my website. Updated press people emails. Yeah, no, I think that's the same thing. Like, you mean like people at other magazines and things like that?
So I think what people are talking about, like, so when you send a press release out about a show that you're doing, you send it to your press list. How do you update your press list, literally? Or
yeah, my situation's a little different because I run a mag. I already know people who write. So it's kind of like, if I feel like a show is going to appeal to them, then I'll email them directly. I'm also more focused on sales there, I would say, than press, because the Yard is a very unique space in that it is kind of a hybrid. It's a mix of like a co-working and an event site and an art gallery. So they have multiple sites. So my main focus there is on sales first and press kind of second. I'm sorry I don't have a answer for you, but I do understand the question. And I would say, if you're asking for advice on that, to kind of look up who's already written about the kind of things that you're making and see what their emails are.
Excellent advice. Someone is asking, how do you organize your thoughts when you are at the time right before the opening in terms of a special reach out to collectors, what their interests are, etc.? Do you use a spreadsheet or an address book, or is it just all in your head?
It's all in my head. I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'm a person. I have to say, like, you know, I feel almost not mid-career, but I feel like because it's almost 8 years now that I've kind of been doing this, I just have an intuitive grasp of who's going to respond to what. And I tend to stay within my networks. I mean, as you heard from Carolyn, I don't run a single space. I do a few things. So in general, if I'm inviting collectors, it'll be like 2 or 3 visits. And it'll be like highly targeted people. Like I do smaller groups or like smaller batches, as opposed to like a giant, like, okay, everyone I know, we're going to have like 500 people, which I think works better anyway after COVID. So yeah. I would say though, you know, I've had to do this way back when in the day when I was an intern for art galleries. If you make a specific kind of work, seeing who collects it and adding them to your email list, but also finding out like who they are on social media, like where they are on Instagram, kind of like seeing if you can slide into their orbit never hurts. But shameless plug, I do run a workshop on this for Ninth Street, so I can't give too much away here, but there is certainly a way to kind of have a targeted approach to someone who may collect your work sort of based on what they're already collecting, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. So a couple of questions. Someone asks, how many projects do you work on at a time?
Don't have an answer for that.
It could be one, it could be five. It would depend on what's going on.
Pivots range between 2 to 6 at a time, but there's like a ton of, I have an open call up right now on Auntie. I have spring workshops that are coming up for Ninth Street. I'm organizing exhibits here at Emasino. So it's kind of, if we're just sticking to exhibits, I generally in the pipeline have in between 2 to 6 at a time.
Wow. So since you mentioned an open call on Anti-Mag, people are asking how can they present their work to you. I suppose that would be a way. What is the open call?
That is one way, even more so. So first, thank you. That's really sweet. Someone amazing. That's really thoughtful. So I actually, for the open calls, I always have a juror because I want for your work to be in front of 2 people. So it's in front of me, but it's also in front of the juror, right? Because I'm like holding on to submissions, but they're looking through them and they're reviewing them. So this is actually for digital work. I mean, but that can mean anything from like a video piece to like new media to like an animation. So if you have like an artwork that you animated, it also includes NFTs, which so the juror of this show, her name is Emily Trice. She is the editor for Artwork Archive. She's part of a collective of other artists as well. She's an artist, but she's an editor. She's a member of the press. She's a critic. She does a million things. She organizes shows, but she's based in Denver. And she's more familiar, I would say, overall with kind of the digital space than I am. So if you want to apply to Born Digital, you can go to Auntie. So again, I think someone shared it on the chat on Instagram, but I'll put it here too. It's at Auntie__curatorial. And that we have a deadline through the 25th. But yeah, so she'll be reviewing it, but I also see it too. So you kind of get 2 hits for the price of 1, so to speak. Here you go. So that's the Instagram.
Thanks. A member is asking if we can, if people can send you samples of our work. Like, do you take direct submissions?
That's tricky. I think you can send it, but that doesn't mean it'll fit what I'm doing right now. If you ever want to send me anything, I'm Audra at Antemag, ANTEMAG.com. Feel free to send it to me. So again, I mean, I'm happy to keep you in mind, but it really depends, again, if it aligns with the theme of something I'm working for.
Mm-hmm. Do you, does your magazine ever come out in print, someone asks, or is it only online?
I've never done print, no. I don't think print is like fundamentally dead. It's not like any kind of a rebellion against print. I just haven't seen a need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay. It's so it's Audra. So it's my name, AUDRA at ANTEMAG.com.
Great. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Fran has it.
Yes. We'll get it out to everybody.
Okay.
Don't worry. Yes. We definitely want them to be able to contact you. Yeah. So someone's asking, well, you've talked about this, but she said, is there a way of knowing what exhibits you're working on so we can send you work tailored to those themes?
Ask me. Feel free to ask. Absolutely. Yeah, you can send me an Instagram and say, I would love to stay on top of what you're working on. You want to let me know. In general, though, I would say all of the top line stuff is I have it on my Instagram for Auntie. And if it's open call, then I'll ask for it. If it's not, then in general, those 3 ways that I mentioned kind of outlined on that slide are, that's how I do it. I've either met you or someone recommended you or I found you on social media. So
so on this theme of themes, someone else is asking, do you look at themed proposals of a small group of artists, such as 7 women abstract artists working with a particular theme?
Not right now, but I will say Amos Eno Gallery actually does have an annual call for shows, usually in the summer. So check out, it's amoseno.org, O-R-G. And it is an artist run space, right? So I'm the director of the space, but I don't, it's really run as a co-op space through the artist members. So I start there. I tend to be hands-on with curating at the yard only because it's, they have some pretty specific, I would say, requirements for their shows, but yeah, and I always recommend too, like looking, I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with the NYAC site, but they do have a lot of like opportunities or like open call opportunities as well. There's a space called the Eli Center for Contemporary Art in New Haven that I think some of your members may have shown there, but I know a lot of art.
Some of us have, yes.
There, yeah. So there are opportunities for that. But the yard's a little more specific, so I tend to kind of hands-on.
Were you involved with the Eli Center?
No, I've never worked with
okay.
I have actually visited. I lived in Connecticut very briefly, so it's a cool space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I thought it was also in New York City, there's the Clemente Soto Velez Center on the Lower East Side. Yeah.
So there are again?
Missions for shows.
Say that name again.
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
Excellent. Okay, and we'll put it out.
I'll have to see it. I just want to make sure that I have it spelled right, but I'll send you a link to it.
Great. Do you have any recommendations for venues that are good for artists to approach for exhibitions? Well, you just mentioned a couple.
Yeah. Thank you, Clemente. Thank you, Linda.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, there's artist equity, right? So you have like the equity gallery. If you're an artist who's a woman, you have, I think maybe Pen and Brush takes submissions. I'm not sure, but they are a space for women artists. So I think they wouldn't be opposed to it. And I think Harlem Art Center as well. And I mean, also these are spaces, like some of them I have approached as well. So it's not like it's free and open for artists and for curators to submit shows to.
I'm not sure I understand this question. Someone says, are you not NFTs? Are you not? I'm not sure what the question is, but are you involved with any NFTs in any way besides?
I'm not, but Emily Trice, who is the juror of the open call, is familiar with that space. So when I have an open call, I hand it over to the juror to kind of like make the determinations for the show or for the for the artwork that's going to be submitted. It isn't actually shown for the open call. What you get is a one-to-one artist interview on Anti-Mag and or a feature on Instagram. So we have, I think, about 3,500 followers at the moment. What's known as a micro influencer in the industry. So
okay. Great. Someone has asked, not to put you on the spot, but have you ever looked at the New York Artist Circle website for artists?
Times I did. I'm familiar. Yes. And it looks great, by the way. Awesome work on the revamp. Well done.
That was our next question. What did you think of the site? Because we've tried to make it user-friendly for curators.
It's much better to navigate now. And also, I wanted to tell you that your marketing around the new launch was very good too, because I got all those emails.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And many people are thanking you for your excellent presentation. And
you bet.
Well, let's see. I don't see any more questions. Love your energy, Suzanne says.
Thanks.
So thanks so much, Audra, for coming and presenting to our group today.
If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I probably respond via email and via Instagram around the same. So either or. Good to know. Know. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.